Hello and welcome to Tales from the Front Lines of Wellness, Episode 2. Today we're meeting with Queen Afi. She's a DC native, a mother, a mental health professional, and a life coach. She's an avid student of justice and mental health studies and an active community volunteer and creator and leader of the Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags organization, which is super cool. It's more casually known as the School for Domestic Violence. And I'm excited to meet her here. Queen is a domestic violence expert, a consultant and talk show host for the Abuser Side Education, which educates on the warning signs of abusive personalities from female and male perspectives. I met Queen at the DC Juvenile Detention Center, and we immediately hit it off, which was her energy is infectious, and she's got a lot of really good ideas for approaching solutions to get rid of domestic violence in our communities. So welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Peace
Yes.
and love. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a pleasure that we got together.
Yes.
I'm happy
Yes.
that happened.
Yes.
Let's talk about your school. It's a local educational and resource center for victims and abusers of domestic violence in the mission of breaking the cycle and teaching proactive methods of prevention.
Yeah.
And you're dedicated to restoring and preserving a stable family environment through educational services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags. I founded the organization in 2008. And I wanted an organization that could speak both to victims as well as abusers. I researched that it just wasn't happening in the DMV, that particular conversation when it comes to domestic violence. The reason for that was because I'm a victim as well as an abuser. So I know that we're not going to end domestic violence without getting the abusers involved and getting them educated on the same topic as we do with victims. The other thing is that the tags are women, men, and teens,
Right.
male and female. And so getting them involved, at the dinner table to discuss domestic violence. And so been taking this walk the last 10 years.
Right.
And it's been a very strong walk. It's been an aggressive and bold walk because the other entity of it makes it that way, the abuser side.
Right. Right. I mean, I've never heard of that approach, talking to people really openly and frankly about owning their role as an abuser. Usually
Right.
we're just like looking to create healing for abused people.
Yeah.
So I did want to start with one of your quotes, and it's such a yogic quote. I love
God,
it.
let's
It's
see
the don't approach the problem being the problem, approach the problem being the solution.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my theory is that domestic violence is a problem. The missing dinner table conversation is a problem. And so how do we approach that problem? The solution will be, of course, talking about it, getting the entire family involved with the conversation, not just all of the information going to women that are victims of domestic violence. Now, I was a victim, but I was an abuser too, right? So there's no solution for me as a woman abuser.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no solution for men victims.
And they don't even want to talk about that.
And they don't even want to talk about that.
Right.
So I'm saying, let's approach it with a sort of a solution for the family to be healed on the conversation.
Right, right. So what resources do you provide then for whole families? Like, how do you get them to come to you?
My big mouth, and just being real and transparent about who I am in the conversation and how it has affected me and my growth moving forward by bringing domestic violence wears many tags education. Right. I'm not selling you anything that didn't work for me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It worked for me, so I want to give it back to the community, especially with the level of victim and abuser conversation.
I mean, that is also that's the way I approach yoga. Is I'm never trying to be like, I'm going to make you so fit and so flexible. Right. I'm like, look, here's some tools, and they work for me, suffered and I suffered, and this is lifting me out of that.
Yeah.
Let me give you a hand up. These are the tools I have.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So
yeah.
classroom is a tool.
Right.
Where I host the community classroom for women, men, and teens, 13 and up, to come in and talk about the various topics that fall underneath domestic violence, mental health, and that dinner table conversation.
Right.
And then, of course, there's one-on-one classroom sessions that women can take, men can take, teens can take, where it's a focused setting to get them to see where they actually fit in when it comes to the tags.
Right.
So when we're talking about the tags, we're talking about verbal being number one.
Right.
Because verbal abuse is very prevalent
Right.
in our community. But for some reason, it's labeled as freedom of speech.
Right.
It's labeled as freedom of speech, or it's disguised as a joke. It is that school adage that says, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me.
Oh, but they're so terrible.
Words are so terrible.
Right, right.
But many of our generations have grown up thinking that words don't hurt.
Right, and that you don't have to be responsible.
For what you say.
Yeah, for the effect of that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So one, then two is going to be, of course, emotional abuse, because now I'm getting inside your emotions. You know, I'm determining whether you're going to be stressed, depressed, happy, or sad.
Right.
Okay. And what does that do? That trickles down to really a person being unstable.
Right.
Mind unstable, emotionally unstable, no self-control whatsoever. And it's ultimately what the abuser wants to do.
Right, because then you have all the power.
Because then I totally have all the power.
Right.
Okay. Then there's, of course, financial abuse, where this is a tag that we don't even discuss at all. We don't even really associate this tag with domestic violence.
Right.
Okay. But you have a lot of victims who are going to work, women and men, because we're not going to be biased in the conversation, that go to work and have to turn in their check to that abuser.
Right.
Okay. And then you have some abusers that are women and men that keep monies from that particular victim, or it's the victim has to always request funds from that particular abuser. And so we educate fluently on that tag, because a lot of victims, women and men and teens, have no idea about financial abuse. Right. Okay. Then, of course, sexual abuse. Sexual abuse really does happen in the household. It's linked to the household. Right. Okay. It's linked to us as little children, where some people say, oh, no, they're just experimenting with each other. They're curious about the body parts of each other. Well, that's not what research says. Right. You know, so we need to be a little bit more considerate that children can be molested by another child. Right. Child on child sexual abuse.
And that is tough, I think, as adults and as the adults that are in a situation. It can feel really uncomfortable to talk about.
It is.
And that has happened. I was so surprised as a mom that I would have to create a policy about your body at so young. Yeah. At so young.
That's right.
And
5 years old.
Right. And to talk about consent. Yeah. And to talk about boundaries. Yeah. And to be equal with both genders. Yeah. They both have to understand and explain to the girl, you can't say no when you mean yes. Yes. You have to say no and mean no.
And mean no.
And to be really stable with that. And as a parent, it can be so tough because, you know, you're already stretched thin, and then here comes this conversation and you're like, oh, I do not want to do this, but you have to have it.
You have to have it, because if you don't, the abuser will.
Right.
See, so.
And maybe not even really understand that what they're doing is so damaging.
Right. Two children really may not understand that.
Right.
Two children may not.
Right.
Now, when you go into an adult mind, there's a possibility that they may not really understand that, because when trauma happens to you,
right.
If trauma happens to you at 5, you may be 18 and above, but you're still 5.
Yeah.
Okay. You're still operating and responding in the mind of a 5-year-old. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And especially if you have not gotten the proper therapy or the proper help. A lot of times with sexual abuse, we don't want to tell on the abuser because the abuser could be your mom.
Right.
The abuser could be your dad. The abuser could be the pillar of the community.
Right.
Somebody that everybody seems to love when it comes to sexual abuse.
Right.
So what little child want to tell that?
Right. And then you normalize it. To make it not hurt you.
Yep.
Then you normalize it in yourself.
Yep. You find deadly coping skills.
Right.
To help you manage your pain in sexual abuse. In fact, with all the tags, but sexual abuse it's a huge piece that we must talk about the good and bad behavior or the good and bad touch with our children. And the issue that I have with that is that the community does not talk about that.
Right.
They do not talk about child-on-child sexual abuse when clearly research is showing that it's happening. Mm-hmm. And there is a conversation that we need to have. We talk about rape fluently. We don't even talk about men being raped. But they are. They are. Okay? So I think that's a conversation, again, when we talk about domestic violence and those many tags, that tag must be included.
Sure.
Our last tag is going to be physical abuse, because one of the things about the abuser, and me in particular, I was locked up so many times, arrested. And so I'm thinking, like, how can I abuse my victim and not get arrested?
Right.
So I don't hit the victim.
Right.
It takes me back to tag number 1 and 2, verbal and emotional abuse. Gives me the most power over that person's mind, body, and spirit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you may say, well, why do you stay? Which is a very insulting question to victims, okay? Let me throw that out there. That's a very insulting question to victims, okay? Half the time, they don't know why they staying.
Right.
Okay? So that's not a good question. But if you ask me that, so why do you stay? A victim may say, I'm thinking I'm in love, I'm still chasing that first high of when I met that woman or that man. This is not them. This can't be them.
Right.
The victim really deeply believes that they're going to get that first high again.
Right.
You see what I mean? And 9 times out of 10, it's probably not going to happen. It can escalate all the way to somebody being killed.
Right. Yeah.
From it. But meanwhile, your hope has got you sitting there thinking that the person is going to change. And the abuser may be even saying, I'm going to change.
Right. And it's hard to make a change. It's scary.
Especially on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is.
Especially when you have financial insecurity.
That's right.
And emotional insecurity.
That's right.
So then, I've seen it even in people that are really healthy. Maybe you're not satisfied with your job.
Right.
But you stay because it's what you know.
Yeah.
And the devil they say.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's getting to the point where our young people are seeing it at this point and they're doing it, literally doing it. So that's where you go back to elementary and say, well, bullying is an issue. Well, I'm subject to ask, well, what's going on at this child's dinner table that, you feel a need to bully someone else? Is it something going on in your own household?
Is it? Okay.
So that's where everything's going to start in childhood. Pretty much with this conversation, I'm curious about the childhood of our brothers and sisters that are that may be victims of domestic violence. Because see, police or CPS, all of these people will say, "What did you witness about domestic violence?" Well, they're not witnesses first; they're victims first of domestic violence. See what I mean? You try to distance them from their pain when you do that. You're not questioning, well, how did you feel growing up in a household where this kind of thing was going on? Right? It puts them more closer to, yeah, well, how did I feel when this was going on with me in my household? Like, I never even thought about them because everybody said that I was a witness.
Right. Right.
Witness makes you not a part.
Like passive.
Emotionally wise. Right?
So what are some of the tools that you use to help people to process that emotion that, because it gets all like built up and then it seems impossible.
Teaching them the signature piece. Domestic violence wears many tags.
Right.
And I have victims come in and say, no, I was never a victim of domestic violence, so, I don't think that's why I'm here. Or, I was never a victim of domestic violence, so I don't know.
Right.
I have that. But then we get educated on these many tags. And they start saying, well, goodness gracious, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse. I wear 4 tags.
Right. And then don't you have I was reading, you have core conditions, is that where you provide an environment that is safe for people?
Absolutely.
To start to process through it.
My strategy is secret. Everything must be done in secret. There's that other insulting comment or phrase or whatever you want to say it like is, why don't you just leave? Mm-hmm. Just leave. Grandmama left, granddaddy left, why don't you just leave? Oh, no, you can just leave the relationship. Like, you don't have to stay there and put up with that. Well, that's garbage. You know, the victim is more safe in the relationship.
Why is that?
Than leaving. Because the abuser will kill you when you attempt to leave. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's really a dangerous thing to do, given that the abuser has already taken your mind and your words.
Right.
Right? Because we take mind and words as the abuser. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that the approach has to be inclusive of both parties?
I think it should.
Right. So
for the victim and the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but as an abuser, you don't come to me and tell me you're going to leave the relationship. You don't do that. You don't keep threatening to leave the relationship, because all that does is makes the abuser really, really mad. Mm-hmm. Okay? When in fact the abuser knows your death date. You don't even know it, but I do as the abuser. Right? So my strategy with victims is that we work in secret. Mm-hmm. To get you educated on really what you're going through, because they don't really know.
Right.
The severity of what they're going through. Victims think that they can just leave the relationship outright. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you cannot do that, especially if your abuser did get physical with you on several times before.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if your abuser did show you a gun or a knife.
Right.
Okay, you can't just leave that relationship like that. It's going to be complicated to do that. But what you can do is begin to work in secret to understand classroom education, what you're going through, right? Which then gives you the courage to go back and look and see what you're going through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then that victim say, you know what? My exit date is going to be January 1st, 2019.
Right. Do you also hook people up with community resources to say, you know, like, I know you have no money. Here's a plan for supporting for learning the skills to support yourself in that way. Yeah,
it's resources that I'm connected to that can help with that. Domestic violence wisdom. Tax is not going to give you no money.
Right. Right.
We're going to give you education, because that's what you need to get the money.
For sure.
To leave. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I can give you money to leave and you're going to let the abuser go with you.
Right.
The abuser will find you. I know everything about you. I will track you down. I will get your mom and your daddy to send you back to me. See? So it's just that severe. Nobody don't talk about it from the abuser side.
Right.
I do, though. Because I was an abuser and I know how severe it is when we do that.
So what was it in you that shifted from being an abuser to saying, I want to facilitate, I want to lift people out of that? Yeah. Why did you make that change?
I'm going to have to say my closest rock bottom was when I almost could have killed my son and myself and somebody else. And at 2 months old, you hear the mothers. I hear moms in my family, and I'm sure you may have heard, oh, I'm a good mother. I take care of my children now. I feed them, I clothe them, I bathe them. I keep a roof over their head.
Right.
Right? But emotionally, do we really take care of our children? And to me, to have a 2 month in the back of a van while I'm driving under the influence and then some, right? Foot on the brake at the stoplight, passed out. My foot could have came off that. My foot wasn't even supposed to be on the brake.
Right.
Sleep, passed out.
Right.
Okay? So that's not emotionally caring about my child. To me, that's flat out abuse.
Right.
Even though what? I didn't physically hit my child.
Right.
Right? and my child is only 2 months old. Oh, they ain't gonna remember that.
Right.
See, what they don't know can't hurt them. See what I mean? But to me sitting there knowing that and looking at my child as he gets older and older and older, and I haven't told him that, is that emotionally really sharing my story with my son and connecting on some deep levels of my past?
Right.
No, it's not. You see what I mean? So I had to take that into consideration. And my question came back to me, said, Queen, why are you cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? Like, what is your issue? Because you're crazy at this point. If you could do that to a child, you're crazy at this point.
Right.
This baby is innocent, does not even know that I'm his mom at this point, and I'm just risking his life like that. So that made me take a step back and question myself about my behavior and just how bad it really was.
Right.
So I try to help people do the same thing, navigate those same, feelings and
so thoughts. You were so moved by that you created an organization at that time?
That put into play, like, once it came into my head, like, that kind of broke the straw for me, because even though I was arrested and everything, I waited years to go back to get that police report about what I had actually did. I had to build up the courage to go get that report. Sure. And I got the report and saw what I did to my child, and it just, it made me want to investigate my behavior,
right,
and go deep with it. So I decided school was the best way to give it to me, because yes, I've been going to church. Yes, I talk to a pastor. Hey, my dad is a pastor. So yes, I live with a pastor.
Right.
I have a first lady in my house. Did they really know the depths of domestic violence? No, they didn't at the time.
Right.
You see what I mean? So I figured school could really probably be my entity to find out from a brain standpoint, what was I actually going through,
right, mentally
and emotionally, putting my children in harm's way like that.
Right.
So
there you go.
And that's how that came about. As I was having this conversation for 10 years, or let's say 8 years, I have, my daughter's the oldest child who traveled with me on different locations to have the conversation. Schools and everything like that.
How old is she at this point?
She's probably around, I want to say maybe a good 13, 14, maybe. And, of course, I had to, ask her for her forgiveness, because I put her in harm's way, too.
Right.
But it was my rock bottom.
Right.
Right. And so she encouraged me to, Mom, yes, I mean, you saying what they need to hear, like, and then you tell them the truth. All of that encouragement there to help me stay on the path to have a conversation that really nobody's not having from this perspective.
Right.
Okay. And so 2016 rolls around, and my daughter in a relationship, and she gets shot in the head by her baby father.
Right.
Right. And her timeline is, we went from graduation 2014 to her being in a relationship with this particular person, to a baby shower, to delivery, and to my daughter's murder, all within a 2-month span.
That's crazy.
See, so it can happen overnight.
Right.
See what I mean? It can happen overnight. I had an event the same day my daughter was murdered. So I'm thinking, do I need to go to this event? Like, like, is this what moms do? Like, we just set aside and go to an event for domestic violence for men, because I was doing my Men Her 2 panel. And I went, of course. Daggone right. This is a conversation that we still need to have. So within 6 hours of my daughter being murdered, I'm at my event, Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags, hosting Men Her 2. Now, who want to talk to men after a man just shot my daughter?
Right.
That just tells me we need to be talking to the men in this conversation. They have been excluded. And I don't care what race you are.
Right.
Most men are excluded from a conversation like domestic violence.
Right.
See what I mean? And mental health. Okay? So my thing is, yes, I'm going out there and speak to them. If it was ever a time that the men needed to be encouraged, it is on the day of my daughter's murder.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you were fired up right then.
I went. Nobody knew. Nobody really knew at that time. A couple people was there that knew, but nobody really knew. So I'm going through the event like, what I do? We gonna have this conversation,
right.
Okay? And at the end of the event, I'm like, and my daughter was just murdered 6 hours ago.
Oh my God!
And I'm here with you guys.
How did they react?
They was shocked.
Yeah.
Shocked. I mean, everybody in there that I can remember was completely shocked.
Right.
And devastated.
Yeah.
And could not believe that I was standing there talking about domestic violence.
Right.
Right. So to me, that's turning tragedy into love, you know. That's turning tragedy into love for me, because I know that's what my daughter wanted me to do. Does that make sense?
Right. And I mean, how could that not change the lives of people that shared that with you when you shared it?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of looked at in a whole nother bracket, which, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm still just having the conversation that we need to have. But see, in the truth, you know, part of the truth is that I still owe for my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And my own behavior that I corrupt people in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would go down to, I would go to L.A. and corrupt you if you, you know, want to have me. So, but I still owe for that.
Right.
You said, I mean, my daughter's murder cannot make up for what I did.
Right.
In the struggle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Even though who wants to include their daughter in a conversation like this? Like, you know, people probably thinking like she's a domestic violence expert and her daughter got murdered. Absolutely, absolutely. That means it don't have no profile.
Right.
That's what it means. It doesn't have a profile. It can affect anybody that is at that dinner table. That's why the dinner table is so important. And yes, I had dinner table conversation with my daughter about this. And I knew who her boyfriend was because I was him. I was an abuser.
Right.
You see what I mean? And I was a victim. Victim turned abuser. It happens all the time. It happens in women. It happens in men. And where does it start? It starts in childhood, where now I'm a teenager being aggressive in my relationship.
You know, so we went to a high school together recently. And I really had the opportunity to see you talking to young men. Mm-hmm. And that was really interesting to me because I don't spend a lot of time with football teams at all. But they had just experienced a trauma.
Yeah.
Did he die?
No.
Awesome. Yeah, so one of the football players on the team had been shot that week. Mm-hmm. So these boys they were shocked. Mm-hmm. They were traumatized. And so we went in together. I went in to talk about mindfulness a little bit, and it was really cool for me to see the adults in the room talking to the boys who are starting to make these life-changing decisions, and to see all the different points of view of the adults that were there that were like, I'm here to tell you, I understand where you're coming from. But if you make these choices, they're going to snowball for you. Right. You have a chance to make solid decisions, and I implore you to do so. Right. I mean, that was really the feeling of that conversation that really impacted me. Was there was no like pride in it. There was no telling these boys by anybody. Mm-hmm. Everyone was just like, I know where you are right now because I have been there. Mm-hmm. And that's the position that I was coming from. I know the suffering that you can go through because I went through it.
Absolutely.
And I'm here to try to give you tools as that kid, just all grown up, that can help you. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the most important ideas when you have those conversations with people? What ideas do you try to really get them to take home?
That domestic violence wears many tags. Mm-hmm. I want you to understand these tags. don't just assume that it's all physical abuse.
Right.
Right. America has branded the conversation being that way, but I'm an abuser. I'm gonna tell you that that's not it.
Right.
Okay. So I want you to get that. I want you to be open to the fact that your girlfriend or your wife can be an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Your mother can be an abuser. So I want you to understand that fact. The other thing is that I want the community to understand is that men are victims of domestic violence too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because not only did you grow up in a household as a female experiencing domestic violence, but your brother was there too.
Right.
And it hurt him the same way it hurt you,
right.
if not more.
I know.
We try to make a difference in the feelings and in the gender. I absolutely want to stop that. And I went to Capitol Hill to share my story with some of the, representative staffs. They could not believe that a woman was sitting there telling them that men are victims of domestic violence.
Right.
And I assure you I know because I was an abuser of men. So they look clueless.
Well, it's so hard because, we talk about toxic masculinity now and really I think what that means is boys are only given a couple of avenues for processing emotion that are considered appropriate and that's anger
Mm-hmm.
and, being macho, being strong, or you can be angry. If you're sad,
Mm-hmm.
you can express it by being angry. If you're scared, you express it by being angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but boys have every bit of the sensitivity and complexity of young girls.
They absolutely do.
But sometimes they have a harder time expressing that.
They do.
And so, I try to tell my boy all the time. It's harder because girls, I don't know, am I supposed to say this? I feel like girls, it's easier for me to understand a female. The way that we talk is complex in a way that males don't have.
Right.
That sounds so sexist. But I feel like men are very A plus B equals C.
Mm-hmm.
And women, we sort of have like a shorthand and we talk about really emotionally complex ideas in a really easy way. So when I'm talking to my son, sometimes it's hard because I have to wait for him to catch up. And I feel like that is very culturally supported, that unwillingness to wait to hear about a boy's suffering.
Yeah.
And to help him to learn how to express it in a way that is, I feel pain, here's my pain. I feel angry, here's my anger. Instead of just only having it come out as anger as a last resort when it's all built up.
Right, true. So the men have been desensitized to their feelings.
Sure, yeah.
And that a lot of times take place within the womb because you have that mom who's rubbing and daddy's rubbing the belly saying, "Oh, we not raising no crybaby here."
Right.
Nah, men don't cry. We stand up. We step up to the plate.
Right. That's exactly what I'm
we
talking
handle the household. That's what we do. Well, and that's in the womb. The baby haven't even gotten here yet. So when the baby come out as a baby, you've already summoned to your brain that it's a man.
Right.
Do you not think that the brain is not going to see him as a man instead of a boy or instead of a baby?
Right.
See, because you already done rubbed the womb and said, this a man in there.
Right.
You see what I mean? You already projecting that he has to instantly become a man. He's not to feel his feelings as a young child, which is crying.
Right.
Which is saying, look, I feel bad or, I'm just so upset about, your behavior as a parent,
Right.
Or you telling me all the time, like, I need to get over it. Like, I can't express myself. I can't go really deep with my parent. And this is how children feel, especially young men, boys. Okay. And so we got to flip that by giving boys that extra encouragement, that extra love, that extra safe space to say, look, you can say whatever you want to say. I have two boys of my own, 5 and 15. So there's a huge gap there. Right. So I'm dealing with a 5-year-old who thinks he's 25, but I remind him that you're 5.
Right.
See, I remind him of his age so he'll know, okay, well, I'm not old enough to say this and I'm not old enough to do this. Now, if he's crying at 5, I understand it because he's supposed to be crying at 5. Right. He has the most vulnerable feelings right now at 5 and 6 and 7, 8 years old. Like, but you have 3 to 17 million children between the ages of 3 and 17 that are living in domestic violence situations. And do we get to talk to them about how they feel and why he's crying? He could be crying because, something didn't go right.
Right.
Or because he been asking me for something to drink and I just been doing something else.
Right.
You see what I mean? Is that really bonding, and getting that young man to feel free to cry?
Right.
To feel free to respond to danger. Does that make sense? Because we say you can't respond. If you telling the young boy that he can't cry, he can't feel, we're telling him he can't respond to danger in an emotional way.
Right.
He must kill.
One thing that we talked about the day that we met was, I think this is such a great idea, how you create these plays.
The monologues.
And I just love this idea.
The brokenness, the boldness monologues is what I've created for another level of healing for women, men, and teens that are both victims and or abusers. So real victims and real abusers come forth to give you that inside look of what they experience when it comes to domestic violence.
Yeah.
Right? And I do that with the under the guidelines of sort of a drama therapy piece to help them express and remember, because a lot of times victims and abusers don't want to remember what actually happened to them. And we must remember what happened to us.
Right.
Okay? So helping them remember, but get it out in sort of a way where it gives them more inner peace and healing to understand, hey, I actually really did go through this.
Right.
I wasn't really sure at first, but I know now through movement, because in the monologues, we're not talking.
That's the most amazing thing to me, is that it's like that it's just expressed physically.
It's just expressed physically.
And suffering is, we talk about this all the time in yoga, that when we suffer, when our emotions are stored in our bodies.
They are.
And so through movement,
it is powerful.
Right. And a lot of times in yoga, you'll see if somebody's really been having a hard time and you do like hip opening poses, people will start crying in class sometimes. Yeah. And so it's so cathartic to move in that way. So I just love this idea that you have.
Yeah. Nobody's doing it on that level when it comes to this perspective of the monologues meet drama therapy aspect. And it really does take you to the core of your brokenness, like you're saying.
Right.
And you begin to remember things that you did not even remember in the beginning. So your brain is working now.
Right.
See, the response to danger is on now. It's literally off while we're in domestic violence situation.
Right.
That is another reason why victims stay. Because the brain is literally off.
Right.
To responding to danger. Why is that? Because it happened in childhood, probably.
Right.
They've been lying about it and hiding it since they were 3, research say. So, of course, when you get in a adult relationship, you think it's normal.
Right.
You think it is your normal. You think that it's okay for you to respond in a way like that. So the monologues really help to shed light on that.
Right.
And getting them to open up and express. And of course, we use our prompts to demonstrate what we went through. And my new monologue is Loyalty, Lies, Betrayal, which is a piece dedicated to my daughter because she was loyal in her relationship. She wanted this guy to do right. She overdid the loyalty in the relationship that you could not see the lies that were leading you up to a betrayal.
Right.
Does that make sense? And we have a lot of teens in her peer group and a lot of adults that are in this right now, loyalty, lies, betrayal. So I thought it was a really interesting piece to do that and show how her timeline took place so quickly
Right.
And how she had poured herself into a relationship and was given love, and loyalty, and she was not getting it in return.
And that wasn't even a year ago, right? Is that right?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2016. And so monologues are a great place, even for me to go deep and share my story, and project it out in an audience of 150 people or better,
right?
To get them to see, hey, wow, that's all I want you to do. If you can just give me a wow, I'm good, because I know your brain is engaged on what's happening here and how their timeline plays out. So the monologues are very, very awesome. I wish the Kennedy Center would call me so we can get down there and come on and do something real down there. But we gonna shine. We gonna have our day. We in the community with it. It's really a community piece, to help them identify. We know exactly what you're going through. Right. We know exactly what you're feeling.
And that's so great to have it in the community and have it be supported in that way, because then you really are, as a group, lifting each other
up. Right. That's right. So that's right. And we saying to somebody who have probably been questioned about their story, especially for men who's questioned about their story, because it is a brother who does a sexual abuse piece for his monologue. And it gives them an outlook like a man is up there sharing in this way through movement. Because all the time, you can't talk about it. Like, you don't have the words to talk about it because the abuser have literally stolen the words.
Right, yeah.
That you need to talk about it. But maybe you can move in it. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We can talk about it and then you can move in what you're talking about. I mean, it sends an illuminating power.
That's awesome.
So, we have about 7 stories that we tell with the monologues. It's always rotating different stories.
Right.
Because anybody could come to me and say, hey, can you work with me in that light? And I'm actually thinking about maybe not transition it from, but maybe adding on to their a personal classroom setting for it.
Oh, that's cool. So open it up to like a shorter term, not like in a theater, but like in a classroom setting.
In a classroom setting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because that's how we start anyway.
Right.
We started in a classroom setting. And it was very good for those victims to share. I mean, it is anxiety there, right. Sure. And you met with resistance doing it. But once you have felt your body moving through what you actually been through, you're like, wow, to your own self. Survivors being there breaking down, Lord have mercy, victims crying and everything.
But I mean, if you don't get it out,
it just stays with
forever. Yeah.
You will continue repeating the same cycle over and over and over again. So that's why I think it's more innovative ways to heal than just a panel.
Right.
Than just people sitting on a panel and sharing their story. I mean, that's helping, but is that really helping you? Like,
right.
Because it hurts to share.
Right.
So, but is that really, giving you a healing, a deep, deep healing? I think the monologues do that for people.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So, we're winding down soon, but I want to ask you, where do you see this going in the future? Where do you see this growing to?
Yeah, the goal is that we will incorporate, or we will collaborate mental health and spiritual health together, because we can't have one without the other. Right. And especially when we're talking about dealing with families and relationships and attitudes and different personalities and different batches of DNA being mixed at that dinner table, we need to have a mental health conversation. Because we just have too much stuff flying around here at this dinner table. And we also should have incorporate a spiritual aspect to it, which could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be deep breathing, it could be you may be participating in your church, or you may be participating in things that are more spiritual for you, because it's going to give you a full circle balance. So that's one of the goals, and that's been really going over well, because I get out and I tell the world, churches and, mosques and temples and, all these places that we go, they not inclined about this conversation. But you dealing with families that are going through domestic violence who come to your facility to get spiritual healing. And really your focus is spiritual healing.
Right.
Can you refer them to a mental health professional when you know or when they've said, I'm being beat, or
right.
I feel like I'm struggling with some things. I feel like I'm struggling with my childhood.
Right.
Can you refer them to a mental health professional?
Yeah.
Right. And that's not what we're getting.
Right.
That's not what we're getting. We're getting that people can be spiritually healed. And that's not all the way true. Right.
Right.
Them triggers, those mental and emotional triggers are going to show up again.
Right.
And again and again. And especially if you don't know what they are, where they're coming from, and how to get the tools like we talked about to be able to rectify those feelings immediately.
Right.
Right? Because in my trauma, I go there. I go there with my trauma. I do. We bump heads. But at the same time, I'm inclined to pull myself back and say, you know what? I had a moment. I had a moment. God keep me near the cross, honey, because I did. Look, I tell you this right now, though. Had God not have been with me when my daughter died, I would not be sitting here today.
Right. Right.
Okay. I can assure you that, because I was the abuser, so I had no problems with killer instincts. That's the least of my problems. But because I was spiritually inclined too, I was able to navigate through trauma and still serve the community on the day of my daughter's murder. So mental and spiritual health coming together as full circle, and then seeing that domestic violence wears many tags become an actual school.
Right.
Because it needs to be a school. The pamphlets and, the 1-800 domestic violence, all of that's good. But it's not breaking the cycle of domestic violence. So I see it as being a classroom like it already is.
Right.
But I see it just growing into its own.
So instead of you going to people, then they'll come to one
They
facility.
do that now.
Yeah.
That's what we do now anyway. But to literally have it as branded or have it as a curriculum, which we already have a curriculum too.
Right.
So we're already doing school. We just need a building.
Right.
You already have your teacher.
Manifest it.
You had the professor.
Right. Yeah.
You just need the building of where it's going to say domestic violence with many tags. The school for domestic violence. It's not as bad as you think. It's really not, especially not what we do in the classroom. It's not. It's very healthy for you. And it prompts your brain to get the answers to those why questions that people have suppressed in you or have cut corners with you about telling you, hey, this is what you're going through. Right. And this is what I've been through. See what I mean? And so I think that's important. That is truly important. I mean, because I'm at your dinner table and I'm not even really at your dinner table.
Right.
You see what I mean? But I'm going to tell you some things that I think can help your dinner table.
So, giving people active tools to take home with them every day.
Yeah. And one of my active tools is, I give this out for the listeners and viewers, is that throw a word out there. Get everybody to the dinner table when you're cooking and setting the table, and let the little people participate, because we don't want to leave them out. Let the boys participate. Let the girls participate. And how about you just get a word? How about we put a word out there like disappointment?
Oh, yeah.
Right? How about we all talk about disappointment at the dinner table? Right? And we hear the little children say, wow, I can really go deep here. In my own house.
Right.
That's the greatest feeling in the world.
Right.
When you can do it at your own house. You see what I mean? I can come in there and do it.
Right.
For you. But is that really going to be effective than you doing it?
Right.
See what I mean?
And having that be a culture.
In your
house.
In the family. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Harvard shows that dinner table conversations work, and it helps to keep down depression in teens, suicide in our teens. It helps to escalate their grades, bring the resilience piece in there. That's a resilient conversation to be able to say, let's talk about disappointment.
Right. Right.
And who was disappointed today?
Yeah.
See what I mean? So don't negate those words.
That's interesting, because I do gratitude a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are we? I talk about that all the time in yoga. Like, what are we grateful for? But it's to flip the coin and say, what are you disappointed by?
Absolutely, it's a very
really
good.
Yeah.
It's a really good way to balance people out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, because when you come to me, you don't really want to talk about crabs at your session.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and who has the greatest crabs. You know, that's not what you come to me for. You come to me for me to say, look, so why are you disappointed?
Right.
See, because that's a word for the brain. The brain can identify with disappointment. And the brain will go to the dictionary and look up the word disappointment. And then your feelings will start saying, that's exactly what we are. We're disappointed that my mom beat me to death, almost to death, when I was 7 years old.
I don't know if I would limit that to disappointment on that one. That's a complex thing.
It's a huge disappointment.
But
a parental disappointment.
That brings up a really interesting point. I was just talking to my daughter about. We were talking about.
Oh, so you have a daughter and a son?
Yeah.
What are their ages?
He's 7 and she's 6.
Okay.
So we're close together.
Yeah.
We were talking about
working with the same brain,
right?
Actually,
right. We were talking about labeling something.
Okay.
And she was like, "Why don't you just call it this simple thing?" And I was like, "Okay," because our world is defined by our ability to express it clearly. And so I pointed at my son. I was like, "There's a boy," and I was like, "There's a tall boy. There's a tall." Curly-haired boy. There's a tall, curly-haired boy wearing a green jacket. That's your brother. So as you define it more clearly, our ability to work with it is refined.
It is.
And so I can see like the value of creating in the family a dialogue and a way to define the world is so powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you can do it with colors, too. You know, you can throw the color yellow out there and ask every child at the dinner, say, hey, who likes yellow? And why? See, because we want to get the brain prompted to asking who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Right.
See, I mean, because you won't need to ask those questions when you get to dating somebody. Who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Right.
Okay?
Sure.
See, but we ain't thinking that far. We just thinking, oh, they'll grow out of it. They'll get it somehow.
Right.
Oh, I missed that point, but they'll get it somehow.
Right.
But you're not even thinking that somehow could be an abuser.
Well, that's the thing is if the more we give our children and our families and our communities tools, the less every person has to reinvent the wheel themselves.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, I am going to thank you.
Thank you
so much for your time and for your work.
Thank you.
And I'm going to close this episode
Thank you.
the way I close a yoga class, which is with the word namaste, which means the energy in me is the same energy that makes us alive as in you. So in that way, we're the same, and I see you. So namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much, Queen.
Thank you so much. Peace and love.